character that Andy Serkis plays in Black Panther, who's acquiring sort of the rare metal that they have in Wakanda. Imagine someone asked him, what's Tony Stark's suit made of? Iron, bro. It's important to stay hydrated in hot weather. Anyway, I guess some people may be interested, and some people have asked to see like actual gig footage occasionally, the sorts of things that I guess most of us who work as guitarists do a fair amount of, and that is kind of being a function guitarist or a wedding guitarist. Having been in and around people that work in this kind of line of business for quite a while now, maybe I think I started probably in about 2015 in this kind of area, so it's coming up to 7 years now. There's a lot of kind of sniffiness around it, but I kind of tried to myself keep a bit of a reasonable attitude about it and be kind of realistic about how these things are. And so the thing that is important, I think, to remember about this line of work is that essentially a bride and a groom have paid a fair chunk of money to have a band play for them, and you know, the idea is that you want to do your best to convey a decent night of music, enjoyable stuff that they're going to want to listen to, try and get the crowd involved in some ways, and you know, not just phone in a dodgy performance. You want it to actually be good, I think, so that people enjoy it. There are a few things that make it a little bit difficult. So one of these things is that wedding venues these days don't necessarily tend to be catered for the musician, and what I mean by this is sometimes you'll come across sound limiters which can be sort of pretty low, and when this happens, basically it means that the whole band has to be quite quiet, and sometimes they can be set so low that you have to be unreasonably quiet, and basically the only thing that you can do in this scenario is either refuse to play, which is obviously a bad idea. You can try to bypass the sound limiter, maybe plug into some other source, but most venues won't allow you to do that. Or you can just try and deal with it. So in this case, if you're a drummer in a wedding band or something like that, taking kind of lighter sticks is probably a good idea, and everyone else basically has to turn down, and that's the thing. Basically your drum will generally be the loudest thing. If your drummer can play a bit quieter, you're going to be onto a winner. Another thing that makes these gigs slightly more difficult is that oftentimes wedding venues are not catered to musicians. And again, what I mean by this in this case is that you get a lot of venues that are kind of converted old barns or grand buildings with high ceilings, like lots of hard surfaces, very few soft surfaces, lots of hard floors and walls and cavernous spaces, and essentially those are somewhat the enemy of kind of good live sounds. The ideal one that I like to play in is actually a marquee, because you get kind of quite a open sound. Basically, you know, it's kind of can be quite difficult to get things sounding particularly good in some venues, but again, it's just a case of knowing that that's what it is going in. That if you stick a band in like a church, or if you stick a band in a barn with, you know, massive concrete walls and concrete floor, polished concrete, there's going to be a lot of reflections, and in that case I guess you turn down the reverb and stuff, and just get used to the fact that there's going to be kind of a bass trap behind the speakers, and enjoy. The other thing to get used to the idea of is learning new songs. So first of all, when I first started doing this, I started picking up work as a dep, and this is, you know, bands that kind of sometimes in last minute situations might need someone to fill in for a gig, or, you know, some cases they know that someone's going to be away, or you might be playing for agencies. So those are the key ways that I picked up work, is either kind of filling in for a friend, last minute kind of deps, recommendations by a friend, or playing for agencies. Now the agency thing can be a bit dicey because sometimes you're going to be playing with total strangers. This is the thing that you probably don't want to tell clients and stuff, but you know, some of that can be a little bit ropey. If I was just getting into this sort of stuff, I would try to advise to try and get involved with people that do it regularly and have a regular band before you start doing the depping stuff, because I think it can be a bit overwhelming, and having a regular group of guys that you play with, to me, is way more fun than just playing with strangers each time, and the music ends up generally being a bit more enjoyable, I found. Generally, the only kind of horror stories that I've had in the kind of wedding scene or function scene is when you show up and you're playing with other people that you've never met, and sometimes this might not be the job for them. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit horrible to say, but sometimes it can be a bit of a, like, why are you doing this? That's the only thing that I've had where it's been really difficult to want to do it again. Generally, if you're playing with a good bunch of people, for me, I found that I can find joy in playing these tunes. You know, there are tunes that I don't like playing as much. There are tunes that I really love to play. You know, some of the Queen stuff, some of the Journey stuff. The first dance we did last night, Alone by Heart, great tune. Just, there's loads of great songs out there, and that's generally what people are wanting to hear, like big tunes. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that this is actually an income stream which is viable for musicians, and instead of, I know for me in my education there was a lot of focus towards like original music or writing pop songs and that sort of stuff, particularly at university, and not so much of this talk about this actual viable career path. And I know that quite a lot of the kind of musicians that are on the proper kind of music scene will have met people on the function scene potentially. So for me, I think the wedding kind of career function guitarist or whatever is the more viable path than, you know, you could write songs in your bedroom and all that stuff, and you could try and slog at the original music thing, but there isn't a great deal of money in that, and there's also not any guarantee that any investment that you put into that time-wise or anything will actually pay off. And in a way, the wedding band thing is kind of regular. It is fairly well paid, certainly compared to like bottom of the barrel original gigs. So generally what I've found is that pay is kind of starting around £180 for a wedding, and then going upwards, you know, depending on how prestigious your band is. You know, people can pull in sort of £350, £400 for these gigs, and you know, if you've got travel, those are factors to bear in mind as well. But you know, to go to London, as I had to kind of wrestle with as a original artist, and not even really get paid for fuel, and then try and fight that competing with a function band paying me sort of £180 to just go and play some tunes to people that are actually wanting to hear you play music, which is not always the way in the original music scene either. I think the wedding band, function guitarist, that sort of thing is actually a career path that has been quite a bit more fruitful for me than the idea of trying to get a record label and all that sort of stuff, or write original music. I think it's an area which probably most of us guitarists who are interested in actually playing music live should maybe consider, and maybe it's the thing that if you're considering earlier on as a young kind of function guitarist, I think you can get the attention of people that might be maybe booking for the proper gigs maybe. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you in a wedding band? Have you enjoyed it? Are you in a function band? Is there any horror stories that you've got that you'd like to share with people? But yeah, here's some more clips from last night. It's too hot. Sorry about that. Also, the mic ran out working, so I'm just talking to the camera, so sorry for the room sound. But here's some other clips from last night. It was quite fun, but it was too hot. Don't forget your iron, Bruce.